A Boy of Nazareth. In the gray dawn of summer morning, while the village of Nazareth was still asleep, a slim boy in a striped tunic might have been seen striding softly along on his sandaled feet toward the edge of the village and the open hillside beyond. I will lift up mine eyes into the hills. The word of the old psalm was in his heart, and he went swinging along through the cool, wet grass of early morning. He climbed to the top of the hill and to a ledge of smooth white rock that caught the first rays of the rising sun. From the high hill behind the village, one could look far away in all directions. On the western skyline, as soon as it grew light, could be seen a deep strip of deepest blue, the waters of the Mediterranean. Soon would come glimpses of bright-colored caravans like miniatures moving slowly along the distant highway, almost hidden by the hills. Some of these camel trains were going down to Egypt, others coming north along the highway leading to Damascus. From there they might be going to the Parthian, or to India, or to some other far-off and mysterious land. Now in the dawn, the faint sound of trumpets could be heard, waking a camp of Roman soldiers somewhere in the upland valley. Rolling hills covered with green treetops stretched away to the east, but were cut off abruptly. A jagged line of hills that were barren and gray marked a sharp outline against the eastern sky, now growing faintly pink. Between those bare, lifeless hills and the green trees, though hidden from sight, lay the gleaming blue sea of Galilee and of the Jordan River. Coming toward Nazareth along the road from that direction could often be seen the small jogging cart of a publican, who, being a tax collector from the Romans, was thought of a sinful man. Now in this early morning there were only a shepherd driving a flock of sheep along the road, and a lone farmer with his two-wheeled wagon, bringing an early harvest of grain to the village threshing floor. Everywhere about lay fields of flax and barley, orchards and gardens, and directly below were flat roofs of the small stone houses, the public well, and by the nearby synagogue. All this could be seen if a boy looked down to earth from that high hill behind the village, and the earth was very beautiful. But if one looked, there was nothing between one and the wide blue sky. Standing there, it seemed possible to reach up and touch fingertips to heaven and to enter into the secret place of the Most High. And there, in the silence of that Most High place, one could feel a rhythmic beating stronger and more steady than the beating of his heart, and listening seemed to hear within him the whisper of a still small voice, like the small voice that Elijah the prophet had heard on Mount Carmel. Within him, within his own heart, then must also be a secret place of the Most High. Looking west towards Mount Carmel, he saw the eastern slope of the mountain, now edged with gold. Soon the whole earth was flooded with light from the sun that had risen. It was glorious to see it from the hilltop, joyful just to be walking down the hill again into a beautiful world. He could imagine the prophet Isaiah walking beside him and almost hear the words he would be saying. With joy shall you go out, and in peace shall you be led, and the mountains and hills shall break into singing before you, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. The Psalms and the prophets. There were never a day in his life when a boy of Nazareth did not hear the verse of the Psalms or the words of the old prophets. The Psalms were the first songs of his mother sang to him. The deeds and words of the great Hebrew prophets were taught him each weekday in school and read aloud each Sabbath in the synagogue. Reading of the law and the prophets was the high point of the service. One sat patiently on a bench waiting for the time when the sacred rolls of parchment would be taken from the ark. Below the platform, facing the congregation, were the benches of the elders. When they were seated with their long gray beards falling on their chests and their hands folded on their knees, the service began. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Those well-known words of the first commandment with which the service began was also written on a tiny scroll within a small box fastened to the doorpost of every house. there to be touched reverently by all who passed. They were also in the little leather box worn on his forehead by a Pharisee. A traveling Pharisee sometimes read from the sacred word on the Sabbath instead of the usual scribe or teacher. At the appointed time in the service, the doors of the ark were open, and the sacred rolls carried from that niche in the back of the platform to the reader's desk. Reading from the law came first. One verse at a time was read in ancient Hebrew, with no one except scholars understood, and then repeated in Aramaic, which was the common language. After the law came the reading from the prophets, 3 verses at a time in Hebrew, before they were translated. Those great prophets. How many prophets there had been in Israel, thought the boy, and yet what courage it must take to be a prophet. How did a poor herdsman like Amos dare to condemn the wicked lords of Bethel, or Elijah to stand alone against 450 priests, or Jeremiah endure to be scoffed at and persecuted? How did they know what the Lord wanted them to say? There must have been many false prophets, too, who had been stoned and punished. But who was to judge whether a prophet was true or false? How could anyone who did not know the clear-seeing eyes of a prophet understand what a prophet might know or see? Could those who never left the narrow streets of a village know what there was to be seen from the top of the hill?